All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and we're going to talk about the welterweight division. Errol Spence, Kieth Thurman, and Terrence Crawford in this video, and Errol Spence Jr. saying something that I like about Kieth Thurman. Let's do that in this video. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video we're going to talk about the welterweight division, the best division in boxing. Do not care what anybody says. Best fights have been taking place at 147 pounds for the last couple years, and we got the best fight I think that can be made in boxing at 147 between Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford. However, Errol Spence Jr. said something in a recent interview about Kieth Thurman that also increases the likelihood of another good fight taking place in the welterweight division, and one that I have a sneaking suspicion the PBC would probably rather make. I hope doesn't get made first, but eventually I really do hope does get made, and that is one with Kieth Thurman. But before I get into that, let me welcome you back again to the channel. Thank you guys so much for continuing to watch the channel and support the channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel though, accept my invitation to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you can get notified of when we release our videos, and make sure you hit all notifications. Otherwise, you just get them occasionally. Also, to everybody that wagers on sports, whether it be boxing, basketball, or what have you, please feel free to take advantage of the promotions that we have going on with our sponsor, BUSR, at busr.ag/Fanon. You'll see it going down here. And support us over there. You get different promotions that'll help you save money or get extra benefits. So let's get into this. Everybody wants to see the Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford fight. Very, very, very secure in that fact when I say that. One of the biggest fights that can be made in boxing, and one that I without a doubt hope gets made. But similar to other really good fights that are out there to be made that I want to see in different weight classes, like Jermall Charlo, Canelo Alvarez, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder. There are other fights, good fights in those weight classes that can be made that if they happened, you know, I would not be terribly upset about. And that typically is around circumstances where there have been fights that I've wanted to see for a long period of time that didn't occur originally. I just, as a boxing fan, continue to want to see those fights, not in lieu of the big fights, but just hoping that they actually get made. So when Errol Spence Jr. was recently interviewed about Kieth Thurman, his tone was very said specifically, he's asked, hey, what do you think about his performance with Mario Barrios? What does that put him instead for championship fights, right? Which is clearly leading towards asking Errol, you know, hey man, what do you think about Kieth Thurman? Is Kieth Thurman you somebody that you'd be willing to fight? Now, Errol Spence Jr., if you've not noticed, has been a little bit more circumspect in saying, you know, yes, I'll fight this guy. Yes, I'll fight that guy. Even with Terrence Crawford, he's like, look, my next fight, what I'm going to do is it's strap season. You know, we'll see about Terrence Crawford, but it's strap season. You see what my shirt says, right? So being a little bit more circumspect, a little bit more indirect about his call outs for whatever reason, probably media relation purposes, and not liking to give people direct quotes and all of that, trying to keep things as contained as possible. So when he talked about Kieth Thurman, I pretty much interpret it the same way, which is like he is more open to fighting Kieth Thurman because now he says with the Mario Barrios fight, that makes him more of a relevant fighter. And if he continues with that, right, then that'll get him in a position to fight for championship fights, right? Now, if this is strap season and Errol Spence Jr. is in strap season, the only people that Kieth Thurman can fight are Errol Spence Jr. or Terrence Crawford. And my personal belief is that the PBC, not Errol Spence, but the PBC itself, I think is aiming Errol Spence Jr. towards a Kieth Thurman fight. And what I mean by the PBC, like after Tim Smith was interviewed and he talked about how he believed that, you know, Terrence Crawford is going to want so much money for the fight that it may make the fight undoable. And that Tim Smith, is the director of communications for the PBC, right? Not Al Heyman himself or the guy that's responsible for making the fights, but, you know, him as the director of communications and an employee of the PBC wouldn't want to insult would not want to insult Terrence Crawford by making him an offer that would be too low, right? And then you take that in combination with the fact that Keith Thurman is now in the top 3 of the WBC, and that that Keith Thurman is in the top 3 of the WBC, and that Keith Thurman himself said that the fight with beating Mario Barrios puts him in the position to be the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. I think that that's the direction that they're gonna that the powers that be want that to go. Unfortunately, in boxing, man, there is a scenario where, if you're not going to sign with a promotional company, the promotional company may not be that eager to do business with you. And in the case of Terrence Crawford, I can't remember who said this. I do believe that it was it was Butiev. I think Butiev might even have said it. That the fight that Butiev is the WBC, he's the WBA regular champion who is aiming for a fight with Errol Spence Jr. said. He's like, the fight that I really want to get made, I want to fight Terrence Crawford. That's a fighter I've wanted to fight. That's a guy that I think is the best fighter in the division, and how he wants to see Errol Spence fight Terrence Crawford. And Butiev was like, I hope that he signs with Errol Spence Jr. That Terrence Crawford signs with the PBC. And if he signs with the PBC, then that would make the fight more likely and a lot easier to make. But Terrence Crawford does not seem amenable to signing with the PBC, so there's going to be that hesitancy on the part of the PBC to risk 3 belts for Errol Spence Jr. against Terrence Crawford, with there being a chance that they may lose all of those championships, and Terrence Crawford may just take that and go, just take those belts and go away, right? So those guys are going to be trying to aim him at in-house fights that may still be sellable, which is the Keith Thurman fight, and I am 99% sure that that's the direction that a lot of those guys want to go. Now, for me, I want to see the Terrence Crawford fight without a doubt. That's the number 1 fight that I want to see in boxing. More than any Canelo versus Benavidez, or Canelo versus Andrade, or Canelo versus Charlo, or even Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, even though that is real close. Man, I would love to see that fight. Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford, for me, is the number 1 fight that I want to see in boxing. But if they do not make that fight, short of maybe a Jaron Ennis fight, the Keith Thurman fight versus Errol Spence Jr. fight, for me, is something that I think would satisfy me, and it's something that I would be very interested in seeing. It was a fight that I wanted to see before Keith Thurman had his injuries and all that stuff kind of slowed himself down. And it kind of stays that way for me, man, kind of from a nostalgic standpoint. And I do think that he looked good enough in that Mario Barrios fight to put up a good fight with Errol Spence Jr. I never thought he was going to beat Errol Spence Jr., right? But I think that it would be a really good fight and an entertaining event. Keith Thurman is very good at promoting the fight, right? So we'd have a lot of really good things to talk about in the lead into the fight, right? And I think even that, in that particular instance, would probably even be a little more entertaining than Errol and Terrence, because Errol and Terrence, both of their kind of guys that are going to sit there in their seats, stare at the camera, give blank answers, right? Never really get extremely heated with each other or anything like that. So, that's just a bit of a dynamic that I think would be there for the Keith Thurman fight that wouldn't be there in other fights. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.